creeps, Andy here, and despite the first and second rule of Fight Club, today we are going to be talking about Fight Club. I reread this book by Chuck Palahniuk. I'm not sure if I ever say his name right, but I don't know how I've always said it. Anyways, I've recently read this and I wanted to do a movie-verse book on this, but I went through and I read it and I just found a lot of things that I feel like I missed out on or didn't analyze enough when I've read this book in the past. I've read this book so many times, but not since, I don't think, graduating college. So it's been a while. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to make a video on all the things that I kind of picked up on this time reading it. I will do a little comparing of the movie and the book, things that I think are relevant to the things that I'm talking about, but it's going to be more of an analysis on Fight Club. So hopefully you guys will stay with me. I'm also very curious what you think and what your interpretations are of these things, because obviously just because it's my interpretation doesn't mean that it was Palahniuk's intention writing it. But you know, we're all right. Art is subjective. It's all good, my dudes. But let's just kind of jump in. Real quick, I'm going to be going over the plot, so if you haven't in the past 30 years figured out what Fight Club is about, you might want to skip this video. I will be ruining everything for you. I'm going to be talking a little bit about who Tyler Durden really is, what's up with the soap business, what Fight Club means to me, and things like that. Let's just kind of start from the beginning with a little synopsis of the story. We have our narrator, our nameless narrator. In the book, he never gets a name. He lives kind of a life that most people do, to be honest. He gets up, he goes to work, he travels a lot for work, he gets back to his apartment where he's strategically selected each article of furniture and dining ware and everything to go with the aesthetic of his life. And then he comes to meet somebody named Tyler Durden who kind of flips his whole world on its head, and he ends up being involved in Fight Club, which transforms into Project Mayhem, which transforms into his inevitable downfall. So let's talk about how fantastic this book is. The first half and the second half of this book really is almost a distorted reflection of itself. And I'll give you a few examples here. One, at least in the movie, it starts and ends with an explosion. The ending in the book is quite different, and there are actually quite a few things that are different in the book, which we'll get to in a bit. But at least in the movie, it starts and ends with an explosion. You have support groups in the first half of the book and Fight Club in the second half of the book, which kind of mirrors each other. You also have our narrator's job in the beginning, as well as the assembly line of soap making at the second half of the book. There's also comparisons of like how he lives in the beginning. You know, you have a description of his apartment and everything's neat and tidy and clean, and then you get a description of where he lives with Tyler Durden, which is like a dirty, gross place that's leaking and electricity doesn't work. And you also do get to see the transformation of the character. I mean, you read about it in the book, but you really get to see his transformation from the beginning to the end. So it is really interesting. It's kind of like our main narrator is looking at a distorted version of himself. The way this book is written is just, it's genius. It really is. Next off, let's talk about the circular way of writing in this book. I mean, the story's kind of like this. It's very fragmented. It's not a cohesive, you know, beginning to end storyline by any means. You get little flashes. But let's talk particularly about chapter 3. So chapter 3 starts with waking up, and then it talks about how he wishes the plane would crash, then how he met Tyler, then waking up, then talking about how he wishes the plane crashed, then meeting Tyler. So it is very circular. And I think that this is intentional. It seems purposeful and not just a stylistic choice, given the fact that I've read most of Palahniuk's books and they're not all written in this manner. So I think it's actually maybe a metaphor for his mundane, routine existence that he's trying so desperately to destroy and break free from. And so I think even the way that the story is written, you know, stylistically, is very reflective of what takes place in the story. And then also one other just super interesting things, we get no direct quotes from our narrator in this book, which is so interesting. I can't think of any other book, maybe Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates. Besides maybe that one, I can't think of any other book that there are no direct quotes from the narrator, who is also a character in the story. He'll talk and then quote other people responding to him. And I think this obviously is important to differentiate what Tyler Durden is saying and what our narrator is saying. I'm going to call him our narrator because in the book it's very clear that he does not have a name, that he is separate from Tyler Durden. I think in the movie, Tyler Durden says something like, you can be whoever you're gonna be, but I'm Tyler Durden. Okay, so let's talk really quick about who Tyler Durden actually is. I wanna read you some quotes from the book. I also wanna tell you what the movie says and then what my idea of Tyler Durden is. So this is what our narrator says. He says, oh, this is bullshit, this is a dream. Tyler is a projection. He's a dissociative personality disorder, a psychogenic fugue state. Tyler Durden is my hallucination. This says, I was tired and crazy and rushed, and every time I boarded a plane, I wanted the plane to crash. I envied the people dying of cancer. I hated my life. I was tired and bored with my job and my furniture, and I couldn't see any way to change these things. So I think this is more into like why he created Tyler, right? And then you have this comment which says, I love everything about Tyler Durden. His courage and his smarts, his nerve. Tyler is funny and charming and forceful and independent. Men look up to him and expect him to change the world. Tyler is capable and free, and I am not. I am nothing in the world compared to Tyler Durden. You also have the movie which comments that he's some sort of like alter ego to our main character. Some people have also related Tyler Durden to like the id, you know, like id, superego. And some people even argue that Marla is a part of the equation as well, but I don't know that she's necessarily any sort of moral compass. She is at most as much nihilistic as all the other characters, if not even more. So I'm not sure where that necessarily fits into the equation. But I think the most telling part of Tyler Durden and who he actually is his career. He's a projectionist, which I think just fits too well to not be talked about. He's a projection. He's a projection of everything that our narrator wants to be. He's a projection of everything he wishes he could be, and that is how Tyler Durden comes about. Now let's talk about soap for a second, because I was racking my brain reading this. Like, why does the soap have to? I know that there's a deeper meaning here. And it wasn't until I was watching the movie that it took me back to what was said about soap in the book. And then I started thinking, okay, so Tyler Durden's whole thing is he's trying to like break down the person, to destroy everything, to break him down, to have nothing, to hit rock bottom. He wants to break down society on the backs of human sacrifices to rebuild it back up in a better way, right? That's what his whole thing. He goes on and on about how you're nothing special. Maybe I'll read that quote now and we'll come back to it in a second. This is a Tyler Durden quote, or people reading Tyler's words. He says, you are not a beautiful and unique snowflake. You are the same decaying organic matter as everyone else, and we are all part of the same compost pile. So kind of keep that in the back of your head for a second. So Tyler tells a story about how a long time ago there was a hill where people were killed, and downriver from that hill, people figured out that if they washed their clothes in that part of the river, their clothes became cleaner. And it took me a while to figure out, but I'm like, wait, that's exactly what Tyler's talking about, right? It's like destroying everything to create something better. And so it's also interesting, you know, to analyze what soap is, that it cleans, that it kills germs, that it's, you know, a better version of anything that they've had before, and it was created from the dead bodies of their, you know, assuming fellow friends, or at least fellow people in their community. And then also the comment on, in the movie, I can't remember exactly if this was verbatim in the book, but how they take liposuction from women who are rich and they create soap and sell it back to them. And so that, I think, feeds into the idea some people view this as like a movie on capitalism, and we'll talk about that in a second. Interesting, right? So there's a lot to analyze, I think, with the soap. I think that there's just a way bigger meaning behind it than I ever realized reading the book when I was younger. I also want to read to you the first line of the book, just because, I mean, come on, this is brilliant shit right here. It just says, Tyler gets me a job as a waiter. After that, Tyler's pushing a gun in my mouth and saying, the first step to eternal life is you have to die. Talk about the most intriguing first line of a book, and it doesn't stop from there. And this is why I've loved Palahniuk. His one-liners in his books have always stuck with me. I remember Invisible Monster, it's been forever since I've read it, but it's something like, it doesn't matter how much you love someone, when a pool of their blood edges up too close to you, you'll always step back, something along those lines. That line has stuck with me forever, and I think there's so many of those in Fight Club as well. And just from beginning to end, it's a 200-page book, super short, easy to read, small chapters, just so perfectly easily consumable that, and it was turned into a 2-hour movie, which also is pretty impressive because I think that there was a lot of addition to the movie that really kept the tone of the book, and I feel like the people working on the movie understood this book. It really seemed like they cared about the book and cared about the retelling of it, and I think that's why it's such a great movie still to this day. Now let's talk about what the book is really about really quickly, because there are people that think it's about capitalism or men's right to violence, or some people think that it's a comment on violence in society. The story is about one man, and to me it's more about finding your way in the world, fitting in, figuring life out for yourself. But what's interesting is, even with the use of you in the story, you wake up in LaGuardia, you know, you wake up in LAX, our narrator is everyone and no one all at the same time. He is every member of Project Mayhem. He is the creator of Project Mayhem too, but he also, I think, is like a placeholder for anybody. And I think that's why this book and this movie hit people so hard, is because it really is a story about just becoming so over, I think, the lies of the American dream, and that life is perfect and that you're special and that you'll get anything you want if you work hard enough. I read something online where I wish I could quote it for you verbatim or know who said it, but it was something online that said, you know, I read The Great Gatsby, and that book talked about the death of the American dream, and then I read Fight Club, who told me the American dream never existed. And I just thought that that was such a brilliant way to put what happens in this book. Like, here's an example. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We are the middle children of history, raised by television to believe that someday we'll be millionaires and movie stars and rock stars, but we won't. Oh, it's so good. I don't know if that was from the movie or the book because I found that online. So what is it about? I think it's about the individual person. I think there are comments on capitalism and violence and things like that, but I also think that there's a little bit more of a bigger picture here about, you know, finding your way in the world. And let's talk about also that for a quick second, because this is really interesting. This is in both the movie and the book, and really quick, it's so interesting because some of the dialogue is reversed in the film. So instead of Tyler saying it in the movie, our narrator does. Instead of our narrator saying in the book, the Tyler does. You know, it's switched. And that's so interesting, and I think almost genius, because it doesn't matter, right? It's the same person at the end of the day, and although they do maybe lean more towards different characteristics of the person, I've never seen a movie where that could happen and it would still make sense. So I just picked up on that, and I thought that that was pretty interesting. So anyways, I think it's Tyler in the movie, but I think it's our narrator in the book. He talks about his lack of relationship with his father, and he says that, you know, he calls his dad and he says, what now? What do I do now? And his dad says, I don't know, go to college. So he goes to college and he calls his dad and he goes, okay, what now? And his dad goes, I don't know, get a job. And he's like, okay, so he gets a job. And then he calls his dad, what now? And his dad goes, I don't know, get married. And then we also have this comment here. What you see at Fight Club is a generation of men raised by women. So obviously there's a lot of comment in here about guidance and or lack thereof. There's also a comment about that as a young boy, your figure of God is your father, right? So he's like your guidance, essentially, and how these people don't have that, and that's why they're kind of looking for Tyler for their purpose, their meaning, something to make them feel special, or that your life means anything, even though Tyler tells them that they're nothing, and even though they don't deserve names in Project Mayhem and things like that. Let's talk about the ending of the book as well, because it is very different from the movie, and I'm gonna ruin this for you, so if you care, again, switch off the video. But at the ending, our narrator ends up in some sort of institution, and I think that the book and the movie do two very different things. So here we have the ending of the book. Remember, he shoots himself through the cheek, and he says that he dies, and then he's like, no, I'm not dead, but he says that he's in heaven. And he says, I've met God across this long walnut desk with his diplomas hanging on the wall behind him, and God asked me why. Why did I cause so much pain? Okay, real quick. So again, we know that in this book, he relates God to a father figure or somebody guiding him, right? So that's interesting here, because across the long wooden desk, it's obviously some sort of like therapist or psychiatrist or something. Now it seems like instead of Tyler Durden, he has chosen a potential other person to potentially guide him, or at least he is supposed to be his guiding light at this moment. He says, the therapist or whomever says, didn't I realize that each of us is a sacred, unique snowflake of unique specialness? Can't I see that we're all manifestations of love? I look at God behind his desk, taking notes on the pad, but God's got it all wrong. We are not special. We are not crap or trash either. We just are. We just are, and what happens just happens. This is, I think, such an important paragraph in the book that I feel like I just read over the many times that I've read this story. And the more that I analyze it, the more I'm like, wow, this really shows our narrator's transformation, his character arc, right? Because at the beginning, he felt so hopeless that he had to invent something to follow, even if it was himself. He had to create this alter ego, essentially, you know, somebody who dressed cooler, who looked better, who did everything better than him, who got respect from people that he felt like he lacked all his life. And then he starts following this guy. He starts realizing, oh, this has gone way off the, you know, the wheels. Is that an expression? Gone off the wheels? It's gone out of hand. And so now he has this other God that he's looking up to. And he says, no, you're wrong. We're not special. But like Tyler said, we're not shit either. We just are. We just are who we are. And I think that this is so telling of the character arc. And unfortunately, for better or for worse, we have the very last paragraph, which I think is maybe more of a nihilistic approach to the ending of the story, which says, because every once in a while someone brings me a lunch tray and meds and he has a black eye or his forehead is swollen with stitches and he says, we miss you, Mr. Durden. Or somebody with a broken nose pushes a mop past me and whispers, everything's going according to plan. Whispers, we're going to break up civilization so we can make something better out of the world. Whispers, we look forward to getting you back. So for better or for worse, we do have this one character who has kind of figured out that maybe life is about breaking the rules, which again, the irony is not lost, I think, on the book, where Fight Club would not exist without the breaking of the rules, right? In order for anybody to be involved in Fight Club, somebody has to break the rules and talk about Fight Club. And those are the first two rules. And I think that's kind of the point of the whole story, is like, you gotta break the rules. You can't just follow in everybody else's footsteps and assume that life is gonna work out for you. You gotta make your own way. And you might not be an amazing rock star, but you're also not a piece of shit either. You just are. And if that's not a cool moral to the story, I don't know what is. And then really quick, too, let's go back here, because this I think is really telling as well. They're trying to bring down the Parker Morris building, but here it says the building will fall and it will slam down on the National Museum, which is Tyler's real target. Now I haven't quite figured this out yet, other than either Tyler isn't in as control as he thinks he is, he doesn't have a plan and he just likes people following him, or it's more of a metaphor again of like breaking down the past to build up the future. Which is also interesting that the people in Project Mayhem don't even know the reason behind Project Mayhem. Like, they are left in the dark and they still blindly follow along. I mean, they call them space monkeys. Like, they just are there to do a job. And it's so interesting that they break away from their normal lives, their jobs, this and that, to do essentially the same thing. They still have a boss. They still don't matter. And they still are working towards something that they think might fix society, but they don't even know what that thing is. And there's one more thing that's a huge difference that I haven't quite figured out yet either. Tyler Durden does not meet our narrator on a plane, which I don't know if the movie just did this because it was easier to do that way, which does make sense. But in the book, it seems like they meet on the plane, but if you pay close attention, they actually meet on vacation. And what happens is Tyler Durden is building, he's like taking these big logs and he's making a silhouette essentially of this like hand, and he sits in the middle of it. And I haven't quite figured out what that means, other than like, I don't know, being in the hand of something bigger, right? Like a god, essentially. He's like standing in the hand of God. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. So let me know what you guys think about those two things. Let's real quick talk about the, like, why Project Mayhem was created in the first place, because I think that this is also interesting to kind of analyze as well. After a fight, our narrator says, I said I felt like crap and not relaxed at all. I didn't get any kind of buzz. Maybe I developed a Jones. You could build a tolerance to fighting, and maybe I needed to move on to something bigger. It was that morning that Tyler invented Project Mayhem. What Tyler says about being the crap and the slaves of history, that's how I felt. I wanted to destroy everything beautiful I'd ever had, burn down the Amazon rainforest, pump chlorofluorocarbons straight up and gobble the ozone open the dump valves on super tankers and uncap offshore oil wells. I wanted to kill all the fish I couldn't afford to eat and smother the French beaches I'd never see. And if this isn't the comment of so many people, it's so interesting how reading this book is kind of like reiterated in this new upcoming generation, I feel like. That's interesting in itself. But anyways, I guess the point is like, he's always looking for something different, right? No matter what it is, he's always upping the stakes and trying to break when that boredom becomes his life and trying to break out of that cycle. And then he realizes like, oh, I've gone too far. Oh, it says, this was the goal of Project Mayhem, Tyler said, the complete and right away destruction of civilization. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this book. There's so much that I can talk about, you know, differences and similarities between the book and the movie. I took so many notes. There's some really cool things of, you know, like Tyler Durden being projected into the movie, the way that he interjects the clips of porn in films. There's a difference in the extension of information that you get in Project Mayhem, but also kind of the lack of information that you get in the subsections of Project Mayhem. You know, little things here and there. Let me just do a quick read and see if there's anything absolutely necessary. Oh, the other thing is like that the movie builds to more of a crescendo, and what I was saying was the difference is that I feel like it's almost more of a positive ending than the book is, because with the destruction of Tyler Durden, yes, there will be consequences obviously from the destruction of the buildings and things like that, but like he ends up holding Marla's hand and they're like in love and happy and Tyler's gone. And so I think that it's a little bit more satisfying for the viewer of a movie, like an action movie. I don't know. I sincerely hope this video was interesting in some way to you. I'm really excited to read your guys' opinions about Fight Club as well. This is honestly one of the books ever written, hands down. And whatever you take away from it, if you think it's about capitalism, if you think it's about violence, if you think it's about a comment on society, or if you think, like me, it's more of an individual story about fitting in the world, whatever you think about the book, you're correct. It's art, and art is subjective, and whatever you get from this, however it makes you feel, you're right. But this book makes me feel real good. I love this. I loved every second rereading this. I'm really thankful that I get to come on here and just like ramble about books that I love, and I hope that a few people enjoy it. So stick around if you are interested in more videos like this. I got some interesting stuff coming up as well. Hopefully will be interesting. Otherwise, thank you honestly so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video, horror video about something. Bye guys.